Welcome to everybody. Lisa Herrick is usually the person who gives sort of the welcome and inspirational message, and she couldn't be here, so I'm going to do it in her stead. When a political party loses a presidential election, they often do what's called a post-mortem to figure out what went wrong. So I want to read to you some recommendations from this post-mortem report. It says that the political party's standing with Latino voters has gotten so dangerously low that this report is openly begging for radical change in direct defiance with the party's stance on immigration in their platform. Here's another quote from this postmortem. Our party needs to stop talking to itself. We have become expert in how to provide ideological reinforcement to like-minded people. But devastatingly, we have lost our ability to be persuasive with or welcoming to those who do not agree with us on every issue. Instead of driving around in circles in an ideological cul-de-sac, we need a party whose brand invites and inspires new people to visit us. And finally, the perception revealed in polling that our party does not care about people is doing great harm to us and our candidates on the federal level, especially in presidential years. It is a major deficiency that must be addressed. All of this is from the Republican Party post-mortem after Mitt Romney lost the 2012 election to Barack Obama, when people were asking if the GOP could ever win on the federal level given demographic trends in the country. The chair, Reince Priebus, said in a press conference, by the year 2050, we'll be a majority-minority country. And in both 2008 and 2012, President Obama won a combined 80% of the votes of all minority groups. It's worth reading this report, which actually takes a big dig at Mitt Romney and his hardline position on immigration and references his line about self-deportation. It says the party needs to move left on gay issues, not so much because gays are an important voting bloc, but because their intolerance scares off other groups of voters too. So in 2012, all of the wise, smart, experienced analysts in the GOP were convinced that to win on the national level, they had to come off as more tolerant and inclusive. They had to move left on hot button social issues and on immigration because their stances were turning off young voters. And of course, the party did exactly the opposite in 2016, and we've been living in the age of Trump ever since. I cite this because conventional wisdom is only wisdom and inevitable and convincing and consensus and right until it isn't. These days, it can feel like everyone you know is an expert on politics and has a grand theory of how we're going to get out of this moment. They all know exactly what to do. Just like the authors of that post-mortem from the Republicans in 2012, who were so sure their strategy was going to be the victorious one. And then there's another response that's common these days, which is to be totally in despair, throwing up our hands, curling up into a ball. Look, I get it. It's easy to read the headlines and either feel like, oh my God, if the world would just listen to me, everything would go right, or to feel totally dispirited at times, or maybe every day. But we have to remind ourselves that this day, this hour, this minute is just a blip in history. And maybe it behooves us to be patient, to be curious, to put our heads down, to do what we can, where we can, and then build on that organically. I want to cite for you another little factoid. In January of 2019, after the Democrats successfully took back the House of Representatives in the blue wave election of 2018, and the media was full of the narrative of grassroots activism like our group, how many members did we have in 31st Street Swing Left? Any guesses? You can put them in the chat if you have an idea. How many members did we have in 2019 when we were so successful, when we raised over $1 million and knocked on thousands of doors? Any idea? 37, a little higher than that. We were actually in 2019, we were at 356. Today, we have over 2,100 members. Now, if we could help take back the House in 2018 with 356 people, most of whom were fairly new to activism, didn't know what the heck we were doing, myself included, just think of what we can do now with 2,100 folks with experience, drive, and know how. And here is how we get started. When we read the news, we can feel indignant. We can lecture our loved ones over dinner about how the world is going to hell. We can feel depressed, nervous, and anxious. We can worry about how our democracy is going to go away, and we better watch what we say or do. We might end up on some list, or we might be out of a job. Maybe even we'll be in jail. Those kinds of impulses are a natural response to a world that seems out of control, a way for us to feel like we can be in control, but they don't work. I know because I've been feeling both of those things a lot lately. And then one morning I woke up and I realized, why am I giving up my power so easily? That's not how I'm really feeling. You know how I'm really feeling? I'm angry and I am not afraid. I'm angry and I'm not afraid. That's my new mantra. I say it all the time. It clears my head. It helps me to think rationally about how to get to work. The MAGA and the Muskie folks, they're a little bit like terrorists. They want to live rent free in our brains. But when I own my own feelings, it's like poof, they're gone. I'm angry and I am not afraid. And I'm ready to get to work. So, Jim, tell us what to do.
All right. Hope people can hear me, and I'm certainly getting ready to work. I'm gonna go ahead and open up my slides because that's kind of the way I try to think, and want to make sure that Mary's able to see my slides okay. Um, anyway, as you see the slides okay, Mary? Okay, great. So I got a lot to say actually, and a lot of it is kind of hopeful in a week that's been pretty tough. So if you'll bear with me, because our work is cut out for us, but you know some things are working. So want to remind people of our priorities. Um, First and foremost in my mind is anti-right-wing propaganda. Main thing we're talking about now, we're raising money for, and we have two components of that. One is what we call blue media, and I've decided to call that big blue. But we also have kind of a hands-on component where we do it ourselves in social media. We'll call that small blue, and they both have their advantages. So Wisconsin Supreme Court, we'll talk slightly about. Nothing really on Virginia elections unless it comes up in questions. We're adding another element actually, which is I'm calling it protesting. And I picked that word on purpose because there are protests and there's, you know, physical ones, and then there's other kind of things that people can and are doing. I will say that, you know, we are engaging in this, but I don't think it's something that we yet have any particular comparative advantage about knowing all the priorities for where the protesting should be. There are lots of opportunities. In the DC area, there's something practically every day. So for the time being, we're advancing the general principle that, you know, by all means, if you know something and you feel like you want to go out and protest, and you can be peaceful and you can have signs and take pictures and all that sort of thing, it's very helpful. We will be very selective, though, in just picking a few things, at least for now, where we're going to be recommending action. So part of the good news is that the Trump-Musk mayhem is actually breaking through to voters. You may have seen this a fair amount already. I'll just go through it a little bit if you'll bear with me in terms of the data. So Trump's approval, I don't know if you can see the arrow, but it's underwater for the first time. The honeymoon is over. This is actually the 538 average, and it shows about a 2-point spread underwater. But more importantly, if you look at the polls that are really the more reliable polls, because there are these Republican polls that are just kind of bogus polls. Actually, on average, he's about 2 points, excuse me, 5 points underwater. So these are all things that have just come out in the last week or two. And the main reason for that, and it's not every reason, and there are other things we should be working on, but the economy, in my view, is far and away their biggest Achilles heel. You can see here that it's the single most important issue for voters. But also, and this is just a completely amazing, this is the NBC polls that came out today, actually showing that on the economy, Trump is now underwater by 10 points. And more than that on inflation. So this is a real opportunity for us, but we got to press our advantage. And just to spell it out a little bit more, people think the economy is getting worse, not better. And people think maybe you can't see this. I don't know. But on the right-hand side, way over here, maybe, if the inflation expectations are very high. And also Musk is really tanking, not surprisingly. This is really pretty amazing. You know, between February, where he was almost even, or, you know, he's now way underwater. He's a great target for us. He's perfect for us to be going after. Okay, so now we're in the little blue, but it also points out, you know, kind of our principle, which is that, you know, we are doing these weekly mini storms. And last week it was pretty successful. We had almost 5,000 on Facebook post reach, whatever exactly that is. But we're following the principle of repetitiveness, that it's the greedy billionaires that are the major problem. And then each week we're tying it into something else. And sure, of course, we're saying it's the US economy. We found this really nice cartoon, which gets that across. And so we're sending that out on Facebook and on Blue Sky, hopefully to thousands of people, have a little bit of impact. Of course, more of activism. This is poor old Chuck Edwards. I say that in North Carolina, he's getting his deserving the town halls. So they've pretty much stopped doing town halls, but our guys are doing town halls. Bernie and Tim Walz are out there in those, whatever it is, 14 districts that are going to be crucial for the reconciliation bill, which is going to be the big kahuna. The reconciliation bill with the tax cut is going to be the most important thing, and the cuts to Medicaid potentially and so forth. It's just Julie's going to talk about this a little bit, but this is like an amazing, successful thing that's happened. This boycott with Tesla, not just in Europe, of course, but also here, and the stock is tanking and so forth. And the fact that the president had to have you know, these Tesla cars in the driveway at the White House to try to hawk them, to try to sell them, that means it's working. So somebody put this up on a sign. I think they're exactly right. All right, so I'm going to come back a little bit to that, but I did want to say a little bit about Wisconsin. We did raise money early on. That was a strategic idea, which was to raise it and get it to the C3 and C4 so they'd have time to get it deployed. They are actively at work, so that our contribution is working. The most important thing we're now promoting is this calling, which I'm told, I understand, and we're going to hear from Linda Dreeben in a little bit, is really very rewarding to talk to these Democrats. It's still kind of a lowish turnout election. It's not, you know, and there are low turnout Democrats, for example, and they're being well targeted, apparently. The other thing is, of course, we have two of our very intrepid members, who are going out, Catherine and Diane, with a little bit of our support in a few days, and they're going to be canvassing, and they are, by every account, wonderful canvassers that help stimulate Wisconsin people to canvass. Okay, now we're going to shift to Blue Media. And in a way, Blue Media is a long-term thing, but it's also a short-term thing because we need to be continue to get our message out there, and it's not going to, we can do some things, but there are challenges. So this is an interesting report that came out for Media Matters this week, which shows followership, if you will, on shows, whether they're considered red or blue. And it turns out that currently by a ratio about 5 to 1, as represented by these bubbles, we're outnumbered. But, the glass is still 1/6 full. And we're showing that I say we, the Blue Media people, the professionals, that they can do this. And, they've been at it for years. So we're playing catch up. But my view is that we can help them catch up. And that's why it's our highest priority. Just a little bit more, just to want to make the point that a lot of this is not about politics, at least overtly. These are the shows that are primarily not about politics. And here they have a ratio about 3 to 1 in followership. But, we do have comedy shows and education and so forth. And we understand that you need to do things besides politics to attract people to talk about political messages. And it turns out that this is one a little bit more hopeful sign, that if you just look at views as opposed to followership. So there's a number of followers that they have, but also like how many people are actually looking at these things. It turns out if you look at YouTube, for example, which is, I'm told, the most important thing by far, we're only losing by about 3 to 1. So we're up and coming, and that's why we need your help. All right. So we're raising money for these folks with help with the Swing Blue Alliance for Chorus. There's also the Better Internet Initiative, which also has this other name called the Fellow Americans Education Fund. Our goal is $250,000. And what do you think we're up to? It's not 37, Aaron. It's I'm not going to ask people to put it in the chat. It's 220,000. So this is really good. We're within striking distance. So let's bring this home for these two organizations. And I did want to, and we're not going to hear from the Better Internet Initiative, which has this other name as well. But they're small, but they're mighty. So they're really very effective, and they have the advantage of being a C3, so it's tax deductible. And we still need money for them also. All right, so we knew we were supporting Chorus to do these things, and then it turns out though that they're doing this other thing that may be at least as important, or maybe more important, which is that they're working very carefully, effectively, with our leaders on the Hill and otherwise to improve their ability to communicate, especially digitally. We all have this concern that our Democratic leaders are not all that good in communicating in the modern era. So Josh Cook, who's going to come up in a minute, is going to talk a little bit about Chorus in general, but hopefully specifically about what they're doing on the Hill and otherwise to improve communication from these folks. So with that, we'll turn it over to Josh, who I know is here. Over to you, Josh.
Thank you all for having me. This is becoming sort of a regular thing for us on the Chorus side to join y'all, and would just like to say on behalf of myself, Brian Tyler Cohen, who joined a few weeks ago, we really like being here, and we really appreciate everything you all are doing. We're also working to help support in Wisconsin. So that's just an update that makes me feel good about the world. I don't think there's anything more critical right now outside of DC than that. So Thanks for the folks who sound like they're going, and the phone banking. It all matters. We've been talking to folks like Ben Wickler, and they will tell you like this is one of those you really have to leave it all on the field. I'm gonna share my screen really quickly. Give me just 1 second on that. There we go. Can folks see the presentation?
Not
Shouted
yet.
no. All right, how about now?
Yep.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right, thank you. I'm, again, not in charge of IT most of the time here. So really quick, just overview on Chorus. As Jim just mentioned, we're trying to sort of solve for the problem that I think we're all aware of now, and some folks weren't fully with before the election, but it became readily apparent right after, which is as our traditional media has declined over time, which is mostly the fault of the folks who ran traditional media. Online content creators on social media have sort of filled the void for where most people are getting their news. This is good in many ways and bad in others. During the election, we saw a lot of the negative. This means for tens of millions of Americans, they're potentially trapped in an online circle where disinformation is flourishing. They're regularly told toxic behavior is what makes a man, which is a whole other issue that we're not going to address today. And there's just also a steady feed of anti-democratic propaganda. This stretches well beyond politics. It goes to entertainment. Everything Jim just showed, we already know this, I think, in this group. So Chorus is here with a really clear point of view. Chorus is organized by about 25 content creators, including Brian Tyler Cohen, Politics Girl, Roland Martin, a bunch of folks you probably haven't heard of, but someone in your family has, and that's the point. And we're really here to go where the people are. The majority of Americans are getting their news on digital devices. You can see this in this great chart from Pew Research that they put out recently. Most folks start their day by taking out their phone, opening their preferred social media app, and seeing what's going on in the world. That is different for everyone, but that just means we have to be everywhere. You'll see if you look all the way at the bottom of the chart, some things haven't changed. The last few years, radio and print publications have dropped and dropped and dropped, and they're not going anywhere, but they're not going anywhere good. So in this moment, we wanted to bring together a chorus of content creators to distribute information on issues that matter most to where people are getting their information from. So how we're doing this, we're incubating a cohort of content creators to help get progressive messaging out into the world. We provide messaging guidance, production support, booking guests, which we'll talk about. Jim alluded to some of our work at Capitol Hill. And we started with just those first 20 creators, already an audience of 40 million people, getting 100 million weekly views on their content. And the exciting thing is, as soon as we sort of announced we're going to give this a try, we've had hundreds, I think thousands now, of folks reach out to us and say, I am also some form of a creator online with an audience, and I would like to be involved. So we're working through right now, bringing in more folks, building out the resources to support those folks in a number of different ways, which I have listed here. So the ways that we're doing this, we have set up a newsroom, which is not something that was initially on our list to do, but it just sort of happened. And what happened was basically from the moment President Trump was inaugurated, we had elected officials reaching out to us saying, hey, I would like to talk to people who I don't normally talk to. How do I do this? And so we started playing matchmaker, working as an assignment desk to really connect folks like Elizabeth Warren, Chris Murphy, Jasmine Crockett with YouTube streamers, folks on TikTok, and just let them have conversations. We've done that every single day since the inauguration, and that has sort of grown over time into something I'll talk about a little bit more with our Capitol Hill work. We're also building out the incubator, which I just mentioned, where we'll be helping hundreds of creators this year in various forms, from just access to more tools to mentorship from successful creators who have already figured out how to scale their audience so that we can level out that crazy series of dots Jim showed a second ago, which gave me a little bit of anxiety. And then bringing in new voices and helping them explain progressive values day to day through their content. Comedians, musicians, you name it. I My mom is a big knitter. She is on TikTok. You can see content on TikTok from folks in the knitting community. We should be there too. We want to be everywhere we can in different ways, but it's really about how do we connect our values with different folks' cultures. And then the last few pieces are in-house on Chorus, building out a very clean messaging apparatus so that creators can get the information they need, things that have been vetted, things that they can trust, and put it into their content. A lot of creators are just solo operators. So how do they go from just holding their phone, which is good enough for TikTok, to being a trusted voice on YouTube? It's production, it's editing. Those are things that we need to bring resources to. So we're building in-house resources and collaborative resources to help with that. And the last piece, a lot of the stuff you see online might not necessarily be from the original person who made it. There's lots of accounts that are resharing content. The other side, as well as folks in Russia or North Korea or insert other foreign meddling powers, are very good at amplifying content. We're behind on this, just very frankly. And what we really want to do is make sure that we can help individual content creators do a better job at making sure their content is seen more widely so that it's not just them shouting into the woods, but they can shout into many different woods. And ideally, there's people in those woods. That's not a great analogy. Just go with me on it. But out of all of this, our goal is to have thousands of coordinated voices generating a much higher volume of effective, trusted content, which then in turn leads to larger followings for those creators, which then evens out that wild map of bubbled red and blue as we go into the coming years. This is not something that we're thinking about as a 1 year plan. This is not a save us in 2026 plan, although we would like to do a lot there. This is a long-term plan. This is the media ecosystem that we're going to have moving forward. We're not going to have sort of go-to traditional outlets anymore. So we have to make sure that this is something that can last for a long time. We want to be the infrastructure to this ecosystem for 5, 10, 20, whatever number of years it takes, while helping creators become more self-sustaining. So with that, here's what we've been doing. We launched Chorus 2 weeks after the election. It started with a few phone calls and text messages between creators. We learned how to file paperwork for a C4. We threw up a website. Creators did what they do best. They made videos to announce our vision of the world. As we headed into this year, we've tried to really seize every opportunity to show the impact creators can have so that we can get our leadership in DC and around the country to understand that they need to start adjusting their playbook for the modern era. Through that work, as I mentioned, we've been booking elected officials. Brian, who spoke a few weeks ago to 31st Street, Tyler Cohen, we took him to Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago. He presented to the House Democratic Caucus, the Senate Democratic Caucus at their weekly luncheon, which is just senators and whoever they want to hear from. And then we also trained nearly 225 communication staffers on Capitol Hill representing members of Congress. And I have a copy of it here. We gave everyone a one-sheeter with do's and don'ts. One of them literally says, buy a little microphone so you can hold it and talk to it and just record content as you're walking down the hallway to a vote. If you've seen any social media from elected officials in the past few weeks, they all bought the microphone. That's a good step. We told them to not worry about the perfect message. Elon Musk tweets 1,800 times in 3 days. The news cycle moves faster than ever. So if you're crafting the perfect tweet, you've probably wasted too many minutes or hours, God forbid, and the cycle's already moved on. And if you make mistakes, no one's going to notice because we're moving so fast. There was a clip of a congresswoman who meant to say something like, we're going to stop Donald fucking Trump or something like that. She basically said, we're going to F Donald Trump, which had a completely different meaning. If you didn't hear about it, it's just proof that the news cycle moves very, very quickly. So we've been training members one-on-one. We've had content creators since those meetings Brian did go and sit down with members on the Senate and House side and literally help them on how do I do this, showing their staff how to do it and encouraging them to do it all the time. We need to be communicating to people more often. We also have done some of our newsroom work in these moments. So there was a vote-a-rama in the Senate a few weeks ago. We had 20 content creators who were in and around DC just come talk to senators in real time and share some of that content after this. It just helped get eyes on what was going on, how the sausage is being made, how the party and Democratic leaders are fighting for the policies that matter most. The big moment, though, was President Trump's address to Congress now 2 weeks ago. We wanted to do more there. So working with leadership in Cory Booker, in Catherine Clark, the Democratic whip on the House side's teams. We wanted to really make this a moment where we could counter program Donald Trump's speech. Most Americans weren't going to watch the speech, but as we know, the cycle coming out of that is what matters most. What people see coming out of a major moment, we have to make sure that we're also flooding the zone and putting out our own narratives. So how did we do this? We flew in, we booked hotels, we made sure they were fed, we guided them around like tour guides when you go to Washington, D.C. We brought creators in from all over the country. 43 we specifically helped, and then there were others that we helped coordinate on the ground. They interviewed over 150 members of Congress on the day of President Trump's speech, including members who walked out on the speech. The first place they went was into a room where we had our creators waiting for them to have conversations. That directly in the first 12 hours produced over 220 unique pieces of content. Those pieces of content were shared across every social media platform that content creators were working on. So it's really 226 times 5 platforms each. So now we're talking over 1,000 pieces of content hitting people's social media feeds. Then they're being reshared. So we got a lot of content out into the world. Some examples of this you'll see here. I'm going to try to share a video. I'm just going to say some folks might say this is not the type of content I want to see on the internet. That's okay. That's the point. We have to meet people where they are. So I'm going to give you an example of this really quickly.
You're a farmer?
Yes.
How has the Doge cuts impacted you?
Well, I'll get about $90,000 in contract. The USDA has frozen the funding.
So what the fuck are you going to do about it?
So we got lawsuits going on this, we got protests. Pretty soon we're gonna ask the farmers to come down and just dump manure all over the Capitol steps. So
That's what I'm talking about. Yes, thank you. Okay, everyone, face right here.
Sign for the truck,
Thank you.
the buttloads of manure. It's what the French farmers did to protest. Now the American farmers have to do it.
It's fucking with people. It's fucking with their healthcare. It's fucking with their retirement security. It's fucking with their sense of safety.
What the fuck are you gonna do about it?
Yeah, I'm fighting it. Supporting the Wisconsin Supreme Court race on April 1, because that can give us 2 congressional seats that were stolen from us. I'm creating warm waters so the best candidates want to run in the midterm so we can cut our time in hell in half. And I'm supporting the legal efforts where we've won 33 cases so far, like Mark Elias and democracy docket. So I'm all in. I was in Missouri last week. I'm going to be in Boise this week. If Republicans aren't going to have a town hall, don't worry. I'll show up and I'll talk to your constituents.
They don't like town halls, but you're gonna have a town hall. Let me ask you, what the fuck are you gonna do about it?
I'm gonna withhold my damn vote every damn day. I'm working with organizations like Democracy Forward. We're suing the administration every single day. I'm just say another thing.
There's more of that video. I cut it off. It goes on a little bit longer. That video is from Walter Masterson, who is pretty well known on the internet for trolling Republicans and their policies in different moments. It's a rabbit hole you can go down in your own time. That video got over 1 million views just between Instagram and TikTok in less than 24 hours. Why does that matter? Oh, how do I get out of this video? No. There we go. Here's what happened from those 226 videos that I mentioned. Just the videos, not counting the reshares, just those videos. We got 51 million views on those pieces of content. We saw a wild amount of engagement across. There was different types of content for all different types of people. If you follow a content creator who does interview styles with elected officials like Brian Tyler Cohen, Brian interviewed, I believe, 12 senators, another dozen members of Congress, and just had that content going out across his feeds, newsletters, podcasts, YouTube, for days, if not weeks, coming out of that moment. We really helped change a narrative through that. 51 million, obviously it's not everyone. There's a lot of content on the internet, but here's another reason why it matters. The president had 36 million viewers for his speech. So when we talk about fighting fire with fire, making sure that our point of view on the world, the policies we care about are being seen, this is what we mean by that. And in terms of how this was received, the other big challenge we wanted to really address was making sure we could get buy-in from our elected officials so that they would continue to do this moving forward. The Washington Post had an article come out, I believe, this weekend, worth reading, about how the Senate and House Dems are addressing putting out their policies into the world. Brian, who was here, as I mentioned the other week, is interviewed in it. But this quote from Cory Booker, I think, says everything. We weren't really even on the same playing field as the right. Now we are. Now we're playing the same game. Here's also a snapshot from Peter Hamby of Puck, formerly of CNN's newsletter, where he's talking about just how this was received. Elon Musk hated this, by the way. There were coordinated videos from senators that they all put up ahead of President Trump's speech. Elon Musk accused them of coordinating something nefarious, but in the process, he just reshared all the videos, which got them even more views. And so Peter Hamby, as he noted on this, one operative said, "attention economy" in all caps. That's the game that we're playing here. And the other thing was, here were a bunch of crusty senators forgetting their senatorial dignity for a minute and doing something that got people talking, embracing vertical video over television, and realizing that generating attention for attention's sake is how you put points on the board in today's world. That is the thing we're trying to solve for. This is what we've been doing on Capitol Hill. The last piece on this, this is really just for Jim, among others, but I know Jim loves statistics and stats. This is our favorite. Trump saw a 5% bump in confidence among viewers of his speech, but the downward shift from non-viewers of the speech compensated for a net of no movement on the broader electorate. So in one of the biggest moments in an annual basis for a president, his address to Congress, the response online, the content we were able to put out into the world, negated any success that came out of that moment for the president. We were able to fight fire with fire. So I think I'm a little over time. Let me stop there. And thank you all for having me. I'll definitely also hang out because this is a lot of fun.
Thank you, Josh. And I believe, Mary, you have a message for us?
Yes, I do. Josh, you're impressive. That was really inspiring and informative and helped me to understand exactly what it is that you're doing. So speaking for myself, we are in an absolutely terrifying crisis right now. And we 31st Street has short-term ways of addressing that and long-term. The short-term is protests. The short-term is funding the lawyers who are having amazing successes in the courts. It's supporting Susan Crawford. But the long-term is what Josh is talking about. It's refusing to cede the social media spaces to these extreme right-wing voices and rather getting in there and getting our message and our voices to the down ballot and low propensity voters that need to be hearing it. I personally think that this is the most important thing that 31st Street is doing in 2025, which is laying the groundwork for changing the narrative in the social media spaces. And one thing that's interesting to me, since I'm talking about short-term and long-term, is, Chorus and the Better Internet Initiative, they need money now. They need early money, as is so often the case with our 31st Street initiatives. It's that early money that really makes an impact. Come June or August or November, the private donors, the big donors will say, okay, now I get it, and now I'm going to start giving some money to Chorus and to BII. But they need our money now to be able to staff up, to be able to do the programming on the Hill that they just talked about. So here's my request of you. Whatever your political dollar budget is for 2025, my request is that you give the majority of it to Chorus and to BII. It's important, it's impactful, and it's what's going to make a difference in 2026 and 2027 and 28. Not to in any way tell you what you should do, but my husband and I have given $5,000. And I tell you that to communicate the importance that we give to this effort. And I want to say thank you to Josh and to all the other people working so strategically and impactfully on this initiative. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Mary, for that message. I think what we will do is maybe, Josh, I can throw you like just a couple of quick questions right now. We have a couple other things that we want to address, and then we'll come back at the end and do more Q&A because people have a lot of questions. I'm noticing in the chat, Josh, maybe you've seen this. There's a lot of suggestions for people that they want to be involved, like Jamel Bowie and Contrarian and Courier and all those things. So I hope you'll take note of that and consider those. I think one of the things that a lot of the questions have in common is this idea, like, why are Democrats like so behind the curve, and why are they kind of like it seems like their messaging may be like a little bit scattershot, or that it doesn't seem coordinated enough, or it's a little awkward. There was that article that you mentioned where some of these things landed, some of these things didn't land. Like what's going on with that, and is there an effort to kind of like get better? Like why are we so bad at this, and how are we going to get better?
It's a good question. I'm going to channel some of Jim's Ruth, your comment just made me laugh. Jim's optimism. Look, I think if the question is, why don't we have the voices that the other side has? We do have the voices. The difference is they didn't have an ecosystem to be able to grow and scale. And that's for a number of reasons. But if you look at the other side and just sort of think about the history on their side, a lot of the folks who have really grown over the past 4, 5, 6, 10 years after President Trump was removed from most social media networks after the insurrection, a lot of those content creators went to new platforms where they had a completely focused audience. They didn't have to hold back their point of view at all. And we stopped paying attention to them. And we're like, oh, they're gone now. That was a mistake. In the meantime, we continued to think that we had really good megaphones through a lot of the pillars of traditional media. You could write a really smart op-ed in the New York Times, and that will help make sure that people understand your point of view on a policy. That may work for some, but the reach is smaller than I think we all appreciate. The same is true about MSNBC. There's less people watching day in and day out. But if you asked what is the way that most elected officials are getting their message out into the world, they hadn't updated their playbook. When you look at the campaign, the Harris campaign did a lot of really smart things. They embraced a lot of these strategies. The problem they had was they had 100 days. They had 100 days to get a message out, and they were up against years of really sharp, coordinated work. All the creators on the other side are doing content with one another. There's an echo chamber to that. All of that, sort of adds up to us just playing a different game and not realizing that it was the wrong game until perhaps too late. The other thing I'll say, and I don't want to go too long on this point, but I think Democrats, from a policy perspective, really like nuance. And sometimes we forget, as the president highlighted the other day, sometimes you just got to be a car salesman. You got to get your point across in 30 seconds in a handshake. And if you don't close the sale in the handshake, you might have already messed this whole thing up. We need to get sharper. We need to really just get our point across. These things hurt the economy. This hurts your wallet. Eggs are expensive. Teslas are bad. That's just a personal one. Those things are not the way that we've sort of trained our elected officials. We want to have these in-depth conversations, and we're not saying don't appreciate the nuance, and we're not saying don't get into the details. But in the way that people move through social media, if you're on TikTok and you don't stop and watch a video, you might flip through 90 videos in 60 seconds. So to get someone's attention, you need the very first half second to pull them in. So there were videos that we brought creators who did sort of goofy stuff with elected officials. There was one that people who I don't think understand the internet have made fun of a lot, where basically a lot of great female elected members of Congress were sort of doing like this video game stance thing. So before you pick a character in a video game, people who don't, I think, get internet memes are like, this is stupid. Why would elected officials do this? But if you enjoyed that content creator who is not a political content creator, you loved it. The comments were overwhelmingly positive from their actual followers. It was only after it got traditional media attention that negativity came. So we're doing it correctly when we push these things out and we sort of lean into that creativity. Let me stop there because now I'm rambling.
Okay.
So, Aaron, I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
I think that,
Well, Adele, I just wanted to, we are sort of running a little bit behind schedule.
okay,
So I wondered if maybe we can do is if we could have Linda talk about what we're doing in Wisconsin, Julie talk about Tesla, and then maybe Adele, do you want to ask your questions at that point? Would that work?
sure, or we can do everything and then finish up with questions at the end.
I just think it's 4:53 right now.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Yeah, let's have the other folks talk. Josh,
Yeah.
you can hang out for just a little bit, and then Adele, you can take over with those questions. Linda Drieben, are you there?
Yes, I am
Tell us
here.
about
I'm here.
Wisconsin phoning.
So I just want to say it's hard to believe the Wisconsin election is in 2 weeks and 2 days. And according to people in Wisconsin, there are still many Democrats that don't even know about the election or don't know about Susan Crawford. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done and can be done in the next couple of weeks. I've been making calls with Swing Blue Alliance. These calls are to Democrats and Democrat-leaning independents. They're easy to make. It's on an automatic dialer. You only talk to somebody when the dialer gets somebody to answer. You don't use your own phone number, so it's private in that way. And my experience has been really positive. People actually will talk to you. Everybody has been very polite and positive. For my calls, that's been the case. I know it hasn't been 100%, but people are willing to talk. Many people have heard of the election, and know of Susan Crawford, are very strongly in favor of her, as well as the other positions the Democrats are taking for this election. It's a nonpartisan election, so there's no party labeling on the ballot. So it's really important to let people know that the Wisconsin Democrats are supporting Susan Crawford. And many people say who didn't necessarily know that much about the election, after we talk a bit, say they will vote for her. So in that way, it's been a really positive phone banking experience. But I think they need a lot more callers in the next 2 weeks. So last Monday, there were more than 140 people calling on the 2-hour session that I was on. There were about 950 conversations, 840 voters expressing support for Judge Crawford. And awareness is increasing, but with the limited time and the fact that this is an off-cycle special election and the fact that Musk is pouring millions into the election, I just really encourage people to take on a session of phone banking. And basically, you can do it any night. I think the Action Now newsletters that come out on Sunday have the link where you can sign up for Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, and at different times of the day. And phone banking was not something I necessarily did a lot until last summer, but it's felt good. It's felt like something specific and focused.
Um,
So,
I'm just putting a link in the chat from our last action newsletter
okay,
for
great.
phone banking. So if people want to get interested in that, you can do it every day.
Right. And they do, at least the ones I've been on, give a lot of training. Once you've been trained, you don't have to spend the time being trained. You can, hit the ground running. And if you can only do it for an hour, that's still people you've talked to, and it helps try to reach everyone they're trying to reach in Wisconsin. So
Great. Thank you so much. This is such an important election. Julie, you were going to tell us about Teslas, I believe.
Yeah, I'm Julie Greenberg, and George is right here. We have been to 4 Tesla takedowns in Rockville. You've probably heard of these Tesla takedowns. I think in a recent week, there were 180 all around the world, most in the United States. They're a form of protest. They seem to be in line with a lot of just organic information about Elon Musk that's really off-putting. These ones, and there are 4 in the DC metro area, and I'm gonna right now put in the chat where the website of where you can find, if you're in the DC area or elsewhere, where you can find a protest, what time it is. To my knowledge, none of the protests in this area, the DC area, have involved any showroom occupation, any vandalism, anything that might have been, you may have read as occurring. They're very, very First Amendment oriented. We're just standing out in here and down in Georgetown and in Tyson's Corner and in Arlington. We're just standing out in the public boulevard area with signs, having motorists honk and wave as they go by. Montgomery County Police at the Rockville one are there to support us, very friendly. And so I think this is, if you heard that the administration is getting a little testy about these because they are so effective, I don't think that this is a problematic kind of protest where you have to be worried. Of course, you can wear a mask, turn off your phone if you want to sort of frustrate surveillance. But I would really urge you to do this. Protest is the way that we ourselves get a lot of gratification. You will feel great after one of these takedowns. And every motorist who goes by and who waves or honks or gives you a thumbs up, you are reminding them times are not normal. Those people also get a reinforcement that this is just, something's got to change here. And that's maybe the only thing as they go shopping on the Rockville Pike. That may be the only thing, if they don't look at the news that day, that reminds them. And every day people need that reminder. So there's also a mobilizing phone call for the group that organized these takedowns on Wednesday evening at 8:30 Eastern. And the link to register for that mobilizing call is also in the chat. And I'll put it in one more time. So thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, Julie, so much. And can everybody hear me okay? Can you hear me? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Awesome. All right. We are getting to the end of our formal program, but we like to stay on for 15 or so minutes afterwards. So if you need to roll off, we totally understand. But we have our wonderful guest speaker here who has agreed to stay and answer some questions.
Yeah.
And if people have other questions they want to ask, that's great. Adele has been collecting some that she is going to bring forward. So Adele, go for it.
Yeah, there's a range of questions that I'm going to try to put together. And one of them is, how do we get more effective faster? So the idea that a couple of people asked, how would Chorus get their message out to the senators and House people on the Hill faster because we're in such disarray now. And kind of under that were questions about, what do you think about Facebook and what do you think about Contrarian on Substack? And then another one that's a little different is the idea of we supported Courier Nerds in the past. And do you use any of their information when you're training the podcasters, and what is the relationship? So those sort of a few of them. We're nervous. What can we do quickly to fix things?
Yeah. These are all great questions. Let me try to answer as many of them as I can. And Adele, if I miss one, please hold me accountable.
Yeah.
Let me just quick on Facebook. There was a funny thing that happened. Mark Zuckerberg went to Mar-a-Lago, and then he announced that they were getting rid of all the holding back of content moderation, and they're just letting everything fly. On one hand, that's not great for society. On the other hand, something really fascinating has happened, which is that content is being seen at like 5 to 10 times more people. So, for example, Bernie Sanders has 5 million plus followers on his Facebook page. Those posts maybe averaged 2,000 likes before Mark Zuckerberg changed his policies to appease Donald Trump. Since then, they've skyrocketed. So Facebook's actually becoming what I think we remembered as being a highly effective platform. Again, the same thing's happening on Instagram, same content moderation policies. And just more generally, I think for folks who are like feeling a little antsy day to day, I do this. This is what I do on a day to day when I'm not working. You are all relational organizers, which means the people who follow you take guidance from you because they trust you and know who you are. What you share on your feeds is seen by your network and then their networks if they extend it through another share or they engage with it. That is helping normalize the points of view that you're sharing out into the world. So every day I find a few things, usually in my Instagram feed, that I think are really important. Just a fact about what these policies are going to do. I share them on my Instagram feed. I cross-share that on Facebook. And when I look at who's viewing it, I see people who I haven't talked to in 20 years. I don't have to talk to them, but I know that they saw it. And I know that they're thinking about it, and they know that I've shared it. So sharing is actually hyper important. It's what makes this whole thing work. It also tells the algorithm that this is stuff you want to see more of and that more people should want to see as well. So you're helping impact algorithmically what other people are seeing when you share as well. So don't hold back on that. It's actually very important. On the Courier point, we're huge fans of Courier. We think that they are another model for how to really make sure that people are getting important information in the world. They're doing it through centralized brands, which is a very important piece of this. We're doing it through individual content creators. So just different types of distribution with the same idea. I told Jim this, we were with Tara McGowan, the founder of Courier, right after the president's speech the next day. We're planning to do more work with them. We're coordinating ideas with them, making sure that we can sort of be in lockstep because we're pushing those things forward into the world. I feel like I forgot 3 of your questions, Adele.
No, well, one of them was how like this person really likes Contrarian with Jennifer Rubin.
Oh.
Wondering how is there a way to connect that, or what do we do?
We've had conversations with Norm Eisen. We know that team well, and I think from our perspective, we're hoping to learn from them. They have one of the most successful Substack sort of growth stories out there. We have a lot of folks who are moving some of their content to Substack as just another way to engage their audience. So a lot of what we're doing is working with folks who have figured out something that works and having them mentor other folks who are trying to do the same. So it's creator to creator, writer to writer. So they're on our list of folks that we would like to just ask 20 questions to and share those answers back to our network.
Great.
Okay.
Josh,
I have one more question that relates to everybody sort of worrying about the moment. So right now, what messages are you promoting? Like, what are the most important messages now and in the next week or so? Back there.
It's a really good question. I think from where our creators sit, really just trying to put out information about the impacts of policies happening as they happen. It's just a constant effort. All things highlighting economic indicators, I think, is really important. Showing people that there's an impact to these policies already. before they start seeing prices go up. We think those are two things that are really important. And as Jim's data showed earlier, they break through. There's other things. Obviously, there's 1,000 issues in the world right now, but in talking about like what can we do to sort of shake people a little bit on their point of view, it's the economy is stupid, I think, is the line for a reason. So we're definitely leaning in there. But you also have creators who are following immigration policy and those other pieces, really, really closely, because for their audiences, that's what's important as well.
Great.
Thanks,
Josh, would you mind putting your email in the chat? So people have a lot of suggestions for like particular groups and things for you to pay attention to. So if you could put that in there, then people can let you know what those are. Diane, I see you have your hand up and you'd like to ask a question.
Yes, thank you. I have a very specific question about messaging in the Wisconsin race. My cousin in Madison tells me that there's enormous numbers of ads for the opposition and that they are horrible, saying horrible things about Susan Crawford. I asked her about that and she said, oh, they're just talking about 2 cases out of many, many thousands. And we just try to say our positive ideas about things. I don't think that's enough. And I'm wondering, what can we do? I don't know how many thousands she's had these 2 cases are out of. I'm guessing that the other guy probably has some, pretty awful things to be said about him too. How would you put this together? I don't know if I can contact you alone, but how would we put this together? We can make copies of things and pass them out as we go door to door, whatever.
Just really quickly on this, we're trying to do everything we can in Wisconsin, just to like sort of get information out there. I think the things that we're trying to do, a lot of the creators, if they're just sharing information on the race, are also just trying to push people to give money and give money very quickly to the Wisconsin Dems so they can counter it. I think Elon Musk is approaching $10 million spent on those TV ads you're describing. Wisconsin doesn't have a lot of media markets. That goes a really long way. So on all fronts, I think if you look at what our creators are talking about, it is A, highlighting the other candidate, and B, and their just awful track record, and B, just trying to drive support as centrally as possible back to the Wisconsin Dems and that coordinating table. They know what they're doing. They're one of the best state parties in the country for a reason.
Okay.
So I think anything you can do on those 2 fronts is really a home run.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I know there was a lot of, this is a really fascinating topic. We could spend hours delving into it. There have been some really great questions. Any other questions, though, that people wanted to get in before we meet our hard close around 5?
Here's Diane.
Yes.
Asked her question.
Oh, okay.
I asked my question. Sorry. I'll lower the hand.
Yeah.
Other questions people want to be sure to ask?
Well, I want to make a comment about messaging, which you need to think about messaging in this context differently from the traditional 30-second spot. You have hundreds of people that have their own audiences, and some of them are political and some of them are not. And Josh is saying, yeah, a lot of times they're going to be responding to what's current and so forth. But actually, even in the regular political arena, this idea of sort of the overarching message is really kind of a chimera, or it's not something it's really not, because there are all these different target audiences, there's all these different media, there's all these different situations and so forth. And I also think that, just to reinforce it, the Democrats tend to test our messaging to death almost. And some of that's good and some of that's great. And it's very useful, but sometimes things are just moving so fast. You just have to you just have to go with more your gut and your intuition and your experience and so forth. So I hope I'm not saying something that is out of turn, but just to because there were a couple of points in in the chat about that. Over.
I just want to chime in on that as well. I think there's this sense like I read the New York Times every day and like I'm debating should I stick with the Washington Post or not, but like I'm sort of getting like a mainstream media narrative, but not everybody is getting a mainstream media narrative. Like people are getting tailored narratives. So I think there's this sense like we've got to win the narrative. And it's like, but which narrative are you talking about? And I think the sort of brave new world that we're entering into with social media is like, you know, like I read the New York Times every day, but like my students, that doesn't even occur to them to do.
Right.
The news comes to them and we have to figure out how do we tailor how do we get messages onto the things where it's showing up in their feeds and a message like student A is getting a different feed than student B is getting a different feed than student C is getting a different feed. So it's like a like an octopus kind of information, not like a single like what's the headline of the New York Times kind of information, which is how I'm used to consuming media. So
Yeah, that was helpful.
I want to reinforce my sister's point too. It kind of came up in the chat about where's the big money in this? Somebody mentioned Mark Cuban and so forth. And for whatever reason, the big money people are just kind of, sitting on their hands and trying to figure out what they want to do. That's not good, but it makes what we're trying to do all the more important because if we can sort of help launch this what they're doing and show them that that there's some interest from somebody, it's a huge opportunity for us. Over.
Someone said this earlier, and I just would love to give it a second lift. A long time ago, I was an intern at Emily's List, and Emily's List, if you know the history, stands for early money is like yeast, it rises. And so someone said this point earlier. You all are our early money. I just want to be very clear on that. You have been our biggest funder to date. We've had a lot of conversations with a lot of very impressive folks from the checkbook side. And to Jim's point, they're taking their time. There's a difference in just sort of the risk analysis between I think folks on this call who sort of see and want to move, and then folks at the other end. So the thing that we've been trying to do on all fronts is just show momentum, not wait for it to all show up in some big check. We want to just move. So you all have enabled a lot of that, and just really do want to say thank you. And to the other point, there are 1,000 narratives right now. That's exactly right. But the thing I think that is still important, and I'm sure you all feel this, is, and this I'm stealing this from my partner Stuart. We don't watch Fox News that often, I assume, as a collective here, but we all know what they're talking about. It's because they're very good at amplifying it and empowering their audience to bring it out in their social media, to bring it to their dinner tables, to their Thanksgiving tables. We have to do the same. So whatever your narrative is that you're seeing today, if it moved you and you can persuasively bring it to the next person, that's what we need to be doing. So all of this is sort of in an effort to try to break through on those fronts.
Just as proof of what you're saying, Josh, I never watch Fox News, but if I want to find out what's on it, I just call my mother. And she'll tell me about something and I'll be like, Mr. Potato Head, what are you talking about? And then, oh, So again, these different media narratives. And we on the left, now we have to be as conversant so that if my mother wants to find out what's on MSNBC or the New York Times, she calls me. All right, it's getting to be that time. Oh, and good news, we raised almost $6,000 today, getting us closer to our 250K goal. Yay.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. And I just want to say thanks again for being on this call and for just taking the time out of your day to listen and hopefully to amplify and to share and to just be in community with each other. You are not alone. And as I said at the beginning, I am angry and I am not afraid. We're going to do this. So
Thanks, Aaron.
thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Great job.